Alright, people. I have a problem with a recently released Cold War premium tank. I've been put off of Cold War for many reasons, but this one's a new low for them. Let me explain. First off, take a look at the Chinese tech tree. There's a very conspicuous gap between both tanks in Era 2. This gap is flanked by a Type 79 to the left and a Type 82 to the right. Numerically, a Type 80 would go between them, correct? Well, if only they hadn't made it into a premium tank instead. Yep, the new Era 2 Chinese premium medium tank so happens to be said Type 80. When I heard the announcement of this tank the Friday stream before its Tuesday release, I had my suspicions. And sure enough, when I read the article and took a closer look at the statistics, I saw a middle era HP value. The gun is the same 105mm gun with 432 base pen that you get on the fully upgraded Type 79 and the top era Type 82. The difference? Reload speed. I'll be honest with you, I was told a while back that to balance tanks that are lower in the era to tanks higher in the era, tanks lower with the same alphas as tanks higher would have a better reload. I took this person's word for it as I wasn't getting into Cold War and didn't bother to check for myself. So when I saw that the premium Type 80 had a 8-second base reload speed, but the Type 82 had a base 8.7 with the stock gun and a base 8.2 with the top gun, I presume the shorter reload was due to that reason. But having checked to see if that is the case with other tanks, it's not. The bottom era Type 79's top gun reloads at 8.6. This means the premium tank's version of this gun's DPM is just better. Now I know premium tanks are better than tech tree tanks, that's nothing new, but it does beg the question, why was this turned into a premium with the same gun as both tech tree tanks without any interesting features besides a faster reload than them? It feels very forced and unnecessary, as they already had a Chinese premium in each era. You have the WZ-111 premium heavy tank in Era 1, and sure, maybe it's subpar and the skin on it makes it stand out with True Vision, but it's different. The WZ-122 premium medium tank in Era 2 is different from the tech tree mediums in that it has a 120mm gun with 470 alpha instead of 460 and a missile autoloading system that also takes advantage of the new multiple weapon system. The Type 59D is an older medium with spaced armor in Era 3, which the tech tree tanks don't even have. So they all have a uniqueness to them that this Type 80 does not, and it didn't even come with a skin as the other three have. Now you may be saying, well, Cone, World War II has premiums that are just tech tree tanks too, what's the big deal? And to that I say there's a big difference. We'll take the most obvious example, the Tiger tanks. The tech tree Tiger 1 exists, while the premiums are the same tank but spiced up in ways that differ them. Either by giving it a skin version, which nowadays is out of date, but back when tanks like the Hammer came out, it wasn't uncommon that a whole new premium tank is how we got a skin for that tank. Or by making it into a pref tank like the 131, or making it into a separate nations tank, or even changing its tier from a 7 to a 6, or even different guns like the T6100 or the newest Tiger 1A18. Point is, the tech tree tank still exists, and the premiums were taking a popular tank and doing something else with it. This Type 80 situation is nothing like that. Instead of taking a tech tree tank and doing something with it, they completely took it out of the tech tree and only made it into a premium tank, and just left the gaping hole there with no other tank to fill. So it made me question, are there any other suspicious gaps in any other tech tree? And well, yes, there is. If you check the British tech tree, there's a gap in Era 1. There's no Centurion 3 or 4 premium tank in Era 1, so why the gap? Well, there is a duplicate Conqueror premium in Era 2, suspiciously enough, but that's in a separate era. So what do these eras even mean then? Well, they divide the game into time frames. Looking back at the article discussing the era-based matchmaking system, they specify these time frames. Era 1 is the post-war era, from the mid-1940s to the late 1950s. Era 2 is the escalation era, from the 1960s to the 1970s. And Era 3 is the Detente era, from the 1980s to the 1990s. You would presume then that the Centurion 9 fits into the Era 2 time frame, and I couldn't tell you myself as I'm no expert on tanks and Wikipedia wasn't very helpful, but if we look at the Conqueror itself, I can confidently say that I believe it to be in the wrong era. And that's without any outside research or knowledge. I can tell you that based on the overview of the tank itself in-game. It reads that it was conceived in 1946 and withdrawn in the 1960s, which is a majority of Era 1's time frame, after they started to equip Centurions with 105mm guns. And yet, in this game, it comes after the Centurions with 105mm guns. Even the Centurion 5-1 in Era 1 has a 105mm gun. Now, I see this as having two scenarios that may be the culprit of this gap. First being possibly that the Conqueror was the first in Era 2 and had the Mark II come after it, but they decided maybe due to some time frame constraints that the Centurion 9 should be bumped up into Era 2. This pushed the Conqueror 1 up, and the Mark II may have been taken out to keep it streamlined, and then turned into a premium tank. But if the Conquerors are in the wrong era, then why would they squeeze it in Era 2 here anyway? Well, that's the second scenario that I suspect. They didn't want to have the tech tree start at a medium Centurion, then go into a heavy tank, to then lead back into another medium tank that then also leads back into another heavy tank. Things could have happened differently though. They could have had 5 Centurions that led to the Chieftain Mark V at the top of Era 2, and had the Conqueror Mark II be an Era 1 heavy tank premium. This could have replaced the Centennial, as I don't believe the Centennial even belongs in Cold War to begin with, but the unskinned Chieftain T95 would have still been made. 2 heavy premiums for the British line that are different from each other, rather than the same tank sold twice. We have enough Centurion variants to pull this off. Hell, there's 5 now in the game. The Centurion 1, 2, 5-1, 7-1, and 9. And I know they have no problem with turning a World War II tank into 2 separate tanks in the tech tree anyway. Look at the M46 and 47 to see that one. Or hell, they could have had 2 lines that connected into 1 line at Era 2. There could have been 2 free bottom era tanks, the Centurion 2 and the Carnarvon, and the Centurion 2 would have went on to more Centurions that lead directly into the Chieftain, while the Carnarvon could have led into the Conqueror, then the Conqueror Mark II, then connects to the Centurion in Era 2. I don't see why that couldn't have been done. Then you would have also had heavy tanks in Era 1 that weren't only premiums. Those are just 2 ideas that already sound better to me than what we got. So regarding these gaps in the tech tree, I tried to think if it was their attempt at solving a problem that maybe I'm not seeing. Maybe it was the case that they didn't want an entire era to be of similar tank gameplay, like how all 3 M60s are basically the same. But if that's true, just don't take one out and make it into a premium. You don't need all the variants of the same tank, clearly, as there's only 3 Centurions, where you could have had much more. And you have no premium Centurions either, so it really feels as if with each major line release, we are changing ideas and rules for the game mode, which is unfortunate, because there's no going back to streamline it all and tie it together. They can't go back and make tanks that feel premium into premiums, and they can't make premiums that feel like tech tree tanks into tech tree tanks. It just wouldn't go well. It'd take a massive understanding from the community and a boatload of refund opportunities and free premium tanks for those who earned them while they were tech tree tanks. I mean, remember when we tried to take the FE4 202 out of the game and turn it into a premium and give it to those who had it? That was reversed because it wasn't taken well. Don't get me wrong, I'd love for all those tanks like the M113 and the Starship to be free in the tech tree, but I understand that they have to make money on the game. And it saddens me that instead of turning those into premiums, they've gotten comfortable enough with selling the Centennial again as an unskinned tank, and even sold a skin for it too. And now they've gone and sold a tech tree tank as a premium tank in the form of this Type 80. Gaps in the eras and premiums that don't feel like premiums aren't the only things that's got me worked up with the era-based system in Cold War. I mean, Era 1 feels relatively similar to World War II with similar tanks and alphas for gun calibers like 105mm doing 390 damage and such. But even in Era 1, their view ranges are larger and concealments are much better for lights. When going into Era 2 for the mediums, they all use 105mm guns. All the M60s deal 460 with their stock guns, and all upgrade to 480 Alpha 105s. Now, when upgrading to another era with more HP values, it's understandable to raise the alphas of gun calibers to meet that. But even within this era, things are weird. Like I said, the M60's 105s start at 460 and rise to 480. However, with the Centurion, its stock 105 is the one from the previous tank in Era 1, so it's 390 Alpha, and it only upgrades to 460 Alpha, even though the M60s also come off of a tank with a 105 in Era 1. And with the new Chinese line, they all have 105s too, but start at 460 and never raise. Why all the different 105s? It feels off. And it's not just the 105s. The 120mm guns are the same. Harping back on the Conqueror not belonging in Era 2, its 120mm guns do 400 alpha on both stock and upgraded. The same as its Tier 9 World War II counterpart, even though it's in an era separate from its other World War II counterparts in Era 1, and its gun isn't brought up to par. Yet the Chieftain that it leads into starts with a 440 alpha 120mm, and it gets upgraded to a 470 alpha gun. Why is the Chieftain's variant brought up to the era's relative damage values but not the Conqueror's? Recently they were asked to put indicators on tanks telling whether they were top, middle, or bottom of the era, but it was told that they decided against that specifically as a design decision, as the era-based system was designed to alleviate the worries about a +2 -2 system, which has been highly debated upon to be removed and replaced with a +1 -1 system. However, I find it quite funny that even with this idea in mind, they still managed to make a +2 -2 system in Cold War and make it worse. Now, in each era, you have tanks that are guaranteed to be bottom in every single game that they play, and tanks that are guaranteed to be top tier in every single game that they play. As stated earlier, the tanks lower in the era have slower reloads for the same alpha, and yet they have less armor, less HP, less view range, worse steel concealments, slower speeds, basically worse stats all around than the top era tanks. They could have balanced each era to feel like one tier of experience, all the tanks having roughly the same HPs and reloads and view range, while the tank itself would be the only difference with speed and armor capabilities. And it seems that they wanted to do that. In that same article they say, this system has been designed to create closer games in terms of power levels of the tanks, for more excitement and balance. I feel as if they failed to meet that idea. It's a blatant lie to say that the era-based system isn't just a glorified +2 -2 split into 3 different chunks that allows you to abuse being top tier all the time. Even the XP system in Cold War is based on it. Tanks lower in the era will make more base XP for the same game as a tank higher in the era. This is yet another reason the era-based system doesn't work. It tries to say it's different and tries to be a unique idea but falls short of being innovative. Instead, it's a sad attempt at steering clear of +2 -2 visually while still being +2 -2 underneath the different icons. This all goes to show how incoherent Cold War is. The rules change according to no one logic. I mean, with each tank line released thus far, we've had changes to the same gun calibers, to no real balanced ideas besides maybe we have to introduce variety and the only way we know how to is to mess with the guns randomly. We're tying ourselves to time frames in the form of these eras, and yet at the same time we're breaking those time frames for some. I believe the balance of the game mode is going to take a punishment for it too, and it's already happening. Not to mention the power creep we already see. And I don't say all this to dog on Cold War because I don't like it. I say it because I hope it's heard and passed forward, because the only thing I want to see out of Cold War is its success. I'm close to finishing all the tier 10s in World War II. It would only benefit me to have more content to grind and play. But the game mode has to be worth playing. This is by far not the only issue facing Cold War at the moment, but it's one of many. And I feel it'll take a while to address these issues. Some may be set in stone and never changed, like the True Vision aspect of the game mode, and I'm fine with that. I just want them to deliver on an innovative and new experience without all the BS. And they are doing things right. I mean, the missiles and smoke consumables and multiple weapon systems are innovations, but it's hard to enjoy my experience with them in a game mode that doesn't feel unified. I do wish we can overhaul some things here. It'll do good in the long term, and maybe the player base that has decided to push it aside and stick with World War II only might give it another chance. I hope I've made my points clearly. I invite any discussions to be had in the comments. Maybe I'll make more videos about my ideas on Cold War, maybe I won't. But if you want to discuss things with me some more, I have discussions with my chat all the time over on Twitch. Which they also tell me I don't promote at Twitch enough in these videos, so here we are. Check it out with the link below. We go back and forth on our ideas, and I try to keep it civil, but my critiques on Cold War have gotten me on some people's bad sides, hence my hesitation to make more on this topic. And I know one video a month isn't great output. I'm working on finding a rhythm in other videos I want to make. Maybe I'll post more casual content with games I have, or talking about news, who knows. But I hope my few videos have been very informative and fruitful. Thanks for taking the time to watch, and for all those who support me over on Twitch and the start of my YouTube side of things, you guys are the best.